Sonic Boom episode 100. Don't make me angry. Sonic runs away from Eggman and taunts him that he's going as slow as he can. With that close-up look on his running, he looks like it. Eggman's watching all the time Sonic beat him, and decides that he needs abilities of his own. So he looks for books on biotechnology, but because he never returned a library book that people giggle at him for, a romance novel I think, he loses his library privileges. Somehow he's allowed to use Beth's library card, even though Facetious saw her give it to him and he bragged about it in front of him. Sonic throws a comic book over his shoulder for ending on a cliffhanger. Take that, Ian Flynn, for not resolving every plot thread the minute you can. Like SCC barely ended on any plot threads. And Eggman gets a hold of the comic and makes a device to give himself powers. He better not fuck up. I missed the episode of AOSDH where Eggman became a superhero. He keeps punching and kicking, but out of nowhere he turns into some weird, cute little creature, and Orbot and Cubot have to chase after him with nets with an off-tuned Benny Hill theme. Really? I guess this forced fuck-up is just to pad out the episode until he gets the real transformation, because you'd have to do this on purpose. Eventually they catch him a Medburger, and Eggman's returned to normal, and he says he can't remember a thing since last night, referencing his last time at Casino Night Zone. So they'll reference it, but they won't show it. It's the most hollow of fan service. Orbot reveals that the reason he turned into that thing was because he got angry. He's told that he has to last 48 hours without getting angry, and then the effects of the purple ray will wear off. Really? That's the plot, instead of him fighting Sonic with powers? Why doesn't he immediately run away from the heroes after they start taunting him? It was sweet of Orbot to tell them that it's not far-fetched that he could learn some new science skills. So of course Eggman turns into the cute creature again. At least this is a brand new plot, but I'd much rather see him turn into a supervillain and humiliate the heroes. I'm surprised that Eggman turns back to normal so fast. I thought it'd be for 2 days. So Sonic sprays him with water and everyone laughs at him. But fortunately, Beth at least feels bad for him, since he's being bullied. So Eggman goes to anger management therapy, and fortunately he lampshades that Amy should be in charge because she's a powder keg waiting to explode, and she screams at him that she's a calm person. If the writer knows she isn't qualified for this position, he shouldn't have written it. It just came to me recently. Is this supposed to be a running gag? An intentional joke that she's just constantly getting jobs she's not qualified for? That's not funny, that's a baffling series of plot holes. Eggman gets mad at an old man and transforms again. Is this really just the same joke over and over again? It's refreshing, but it's aggressively disappointing. That's Sonic Boom in a nutshell. After meditating, Eggman is given a test and he passes, acting calm in the face of, I think, the cable service? The heroes literally taunt him like high school bullies. It's already stupid for Tails to do this. They're supposed to be heroes. Eggman acts super eerily polite and walks away whistling. Wouldn't this just be him bottling up all of his anger? Wouldn't he just end up completely exploding? Eggman then gets cookies because Beth felt bad for him, but because she ran out of baking soda, she used toothpaste. It's completely forced that she do that. I'm guessing she'll make him angry. She asks him about his inventions, but she doesn't let him tell her about them, interrupting him. And in more forcedness, she inexplicably presses a button and falls into the trash compactor. And Eggman can't go into the hole after her unless he transforms. Orbot can't insult him, and just says that he has lots to be proud of. But Cubot insulted him just fine earlier. He said he was ugly. And he decides to try to make himself angry because of Dave screwing up an order. Let me guess, he'll get it right. He's right, a broken clock is right twice a day. But still, it makes sense that usually he wouldn't screw up, because otherwise he'd have gotten fired on day 1. Just when he needs him to get him mad, Sonic uncharacteristically apologizes to Eggman for the other day. Well, it's uncharacteristic for Boom Sonic. And Eggman gets angry because he can't get angry, but only then does he transform. And because Sonic heard his entire rant, he knows that the girl's gonna get crushed. It's so nice of the bad guys to try to rescue a civilian for once. She also hugs Eggman, thanking him multiple times. It was nice to see Sonic be unhappy about eating the cookie too. Then Cubot spills soup on him just before 48 hours were up, and he transforms again. Well, he almost made it, so I guess it makes sense that he'd succeed eventually. But I really don't see why he can't just make an antidote ray and use it immediately instead of waiting 48 hours. He made the first ray. I'm torn with this episode. The way it is, it's a pretty refreshing plot, and that's the kind of thing that keeps me interested the whole way through, instead of it being boring. Eggman's experiment caused him to transform into a cute creature whenever he gets angry. Logically, that'd never happen. He'd have to be trying to screw up that badly. He knows science, doesn't he? Also, it'd be more believable if his device was powered by magical chaos crystal instead. And another plot hole is that he has to wait 48 hours and can't just make an antidote ray. Although it was at least interesting they got the idea for this from a comic book Sonic threw away in the library. Okay, do libraries actually sell comic books? I feel like that's bullshit. But that's not a plot hole, just a unique way Boom Mobius is as a world. Maybe there are no comic book stores, just libraries. Oh yeah, another plot hole is that Eggman was even allowed to use the library after his library card was revoked. He never would have even gotten that comic, so the plot falls apart. Also, you'd think he'd have just threatened Facetious Beaver with a robot instead of doing this. Him transforming does nothing but make him run around and have our time wasted with Orbot chasing him, so it doesn't even really contribute to the plot in an interesting way. It also makes the heroes act like bullies taunting him about it. The only good thing about this is that it's refreshing that Eggman can't get angry or else. I assumed this would be an episode about Amy getting angry and turning into a monster, like the Hulk. But then she'd just fight badniks and be mean all episode, so that would have sucked. At least they acknowledged that she had no business teaching anger management therapy. Unfortunately, we see Og teach it later. He should have been the only teacher. But then they shouldn't have had her be enough of a Mary Sue to teach it when she should just be a student. Yeah, I'm really struggling to come up with compliments for this episode. I think I still enjoyed it because it was interesting to see what exactly would happen next. The punchlines were predictable, but the jokes themselves weren't. But at the end of the day, I can't forgive the fact that this episode could have been awesome. This could have been the perfect cathartic stress relief where Eggman turns into a supervillain and humiliates everyone with his superpowers. At this point, he's the underdog. I have a reason to have a grudge against all of these heroes, and there's also tons of civilians I hate. It'd be so much more fun if they just did what AOSDH did, and let him give Sonic tons of slapstick while in a cape. But no. At least it was sweet of Eggman to want to rescue a really annoying girl instead of being happy she fell in the trash compactor. Because she was totally forced to be that stupid, and he could have just left her there. I'm not sure that was worth what I was cheated out of though. At least it was better than an episode full of Amy getting angry. Eggman Family Vacation. We started out with Sonic running away from a sand golem trying to attack him, but then it shapeshifts into Steve. And Eggman slap fights with him after reminding us that he's an alternate universe robot version of him. But he isn't a version of him, technically. He was just a shapeshifting robot. I mean, if he was an alternate version of him, then he would actually look like Eggman. Not kind of similar to Eggman. So Eggman got the details wrong here and somehow wasn't corrected just to make a stupid meta joke about how he's totally too complicated to understand. You know, one sentence clause is too hard to understand. If the concept of Steve is too confusing for the idiots in love with the show to get a grasp on, then they never understand any of Archie, if even this is supposed to be too smart for him. This is like Metal Sonic shapeshifting in Sonic Heroes, except he looks like Eggman and claims to be his brother. Anyways, Mombot decides to make them have a family vacation, and the heroes high-five about finally getting a break from Eggman because apparently it's been a long time since his last vacation, even though it hasn't. Wouldn't Sonic be unhappy because he likes fighting Eggman's robots? Amy plans on bringing her friends to a nature walk, and somehow Sonic's friends are miserable about that, and yet still plan on going. So why did they go camping in an earlier episode from loving nature if they hate nature walks? Then it turns out the bad guys went to an awful looking building that's interestingly in a bottle in the sky. Eggman isn't surprised that a house advertised by a telemarketer turned out to suck, and somehow they all get grabbed and trapped by a circle. The show's so fast-paced I had to rewind it twice. Knuckles accidentally activates one of Eggman's missiles and rides it, and it starts heading for a village with a forgettable, awful name that starts with a G. I'm guessing it's Gogaba Village, since the show's too lazy to have more than 2 villages in it. The heroes go on Tails' plane to start riding on it, and Tails tells Knuckles that he's gotta grab and push the top of the missile to change its trajectory, and they crash. I'm impressed, they actually thought to have Tails wear his useless goggles when he's flying the plane. He barely does that. The bad guys take pictures, the heroes get wrapped up in a snake, and the bad guys get massaged by robots. One of the robots tortures Eggman instead, and somehow expects to get away with fighting him. And he does. The heroes run away from a stampeding animal as well, but it's just a short clip in a montage instead of the focus of a long chase scene full of tension, like in an action series. Then after Eggman's left alone, he's threatened by some robots, including one that looks like Sonic. When I first watched this episode, I hadn't watched the episode that introduced all of these guys, so I was really confused. I thought the fact that they were appearing out of nowhere was the whole joke, which is just what I thought about Mamba and Steve. Eggman's impressed by a really smart one, saying that his processor must be awesome. How the hell is it that Eggman doesn't make all of his robots that smart? Eggman's supposed to be a genius engineer. If anyone's capable of making smart robots, logically Eggman's robots would be just as smart, so we'd have a better chance. This is Eggman, he can make anything. In fact, you'd think that looking at the robot versions of the heroes would immediately give Eggman the idea to make a roboticizer, but I guess not. And then the robot Sonic tells him that he knows Eggman's up to no good, and grabs him by the collar. What, they're good guys? He's not acting like it. He's acting like Sonic when he was possessed by that mecha. When I first saw this episode, I thought they were built by Eggman from another dimension, and were thus evil. Then I wondered if they were made by Gun to spy on him. It's so confusing because he grabbed him by the collar and looks threatening, so he seems to be evil, but he thinks that Eggman being up to no good is bad. So, he's good? So, he's an anti-hero. Obviously all of them are anti-heroes, since in the soccer episode they tried to fire lasers at him. So why aren't they doing it right now? Why aren't they immediately killing him with lasers? When I was first watching the episode, I was thinking, I wish I knew who made these robots and why, so I'd be more invested in this interesting idea. Eggman tells Steve that he's got an evil plan and needs his help, and Amy leans on a tree, which frees another one of Eggman's missiles. Why do they play music when they fire? If the missiles are being sent at the Gogaba Village, it would make perfect sense for Eggman to try to destroy the Gogaba Village, because the Gogabas were so annoying when he first met them. So actually, why hasn't he tried this plan a lot earlier? Why hasn't he already destroyed this place? Like, why doesn't he do it at night when the heroes can't do anything about it? It's not like he bragged about this missile plan to the heroes. They were lucky they even discovered it. Eggman and Steve sneak into a dark factory building run by the robots, and Eggman wants to steal the intelligent processor of the green robot. Steve disguises himself as the red robot, just to turn into a Venus flytrap and capture the green robot, and spit it out so that it gets knocked out fragment to steal its processor. Bolt proves that he cares about him when he finds out what's left of him, and he plans to find out who did it. The Eggmen celebrate, and then Bolt's surprisingly intimidating when he calls them dirtbags. He knocks on their door and threatens them, and Eggman says they have to sneak out the back, and Mamba thinks it's smarter to clean because she'll lose her deposit otherwise, somehow. Even though, well, one, they're bad guys, so they could just threaten with robots instead of losing their deposits. And two, even though they're about to be chased by their enemies. After the bad guys escape in a spaceship, we see Bolt and the heroes threatening Eggman, and it turns out he installed the smart processor in his new Firebot. There's epic music playing at times to create the perfect atmosphere as Sonic avoids the fireballs and just barely avoids a row of them. And some motobugs with glowing red eyes move all over the place, causing Amy and Tails to jump into each other. Styx gets hit and spun around and falls over after messing with her boomerang. I love that they're struggling so much. And a B-bot jingles some keys over Knuckles to distract him as he's trying to get them. And so he gets shot. But I don't care because he's not actually injured from it. So if the shots are so worthless, where's the tension? The scene's lucky that I'm still engaged and excited. For no reason at all, instead of the heroes destroying the robots, the epic action scene is completely stopped by Mombot lecturing Eggman about violence. You know, considering how she's been the entire time she's existed, it actually fits with her previously established character. But instead, Styx explains this by saying that she's got the smart chip, and her assumption is right. Good, I was worried that the writing was horrible for a second, because why would Eggman program her to act like that? But that question applies to her entire personality. She would just be a blind servant to Eggman, like Eggman's robot wife in AOSDH. Then after Eggman says that went too far by doing that to her, like there's a heartwarming moment in this episode because they're protective of Mombot. The processor chip gets removed from her, and the action scene is cut away from instead of us actually getting to see the robots who gave the heroes so much trouble being cathartically smashed by the heroes. You know, the kind of way you're supposed to resolve an action scene. This was the best action scene the show had in ages. This made me desperately wish that every episode was like this, instead of the robots all getting defeated in one hit without giving the heroes any sort of struggle. But no. Instead, Mombot ends the action scene with the press of a button, I guess. And that's it! How? And it sure is convenient for Eggman that not only was it possible for him to eject the smart chips from them by pressing against an intangible button on their faces, but he actually thought that'd be a good idea when that just means they'd all be vulnerable to getting beaten in one hit anyways the second they get hit in the face. Like they had such a Deus Ex Machina at the end to sour the ending. Because realistically, he would have won. I loved the tone of this episode overall, though. I loved how epic and refreshing it felt. This episode was about Eggman, Steve, and Mombot going to a vacation resort in the sky that conveniently exists for them for some reason, based on Mombot's idea. And despite the fact that their room looked awful, naturally since they're bad guys people would want to spite, the plot thread that they'll have a terrible time is immediately forgotten, and they proceed to have the time of their life, complete with massages. Who would make massage robots help bad guys? I'm glad we got to see Steve again, even if his voice sucks. Then Eggman meets up with a trio of smart robots who hate him because they assume he's up to no good. Anyways, because Eggman wants to steal a really good processor from one of the robots, because apparently he never thought to make something like that already and give it to all of his robots from the start, Steve shapeshifts into Bolt to catch the smart robot off guard, talking an annoying dialogue, and then turns into a Venus flytrap to knock him out for Eggman. And then somehow, after getting just one smart processor, Eggman ends up making a whole group of Buzz Bombers and Motorbugs intelligent. And yet, I'm willing to bet that we won't have the robots be this smart in every single episode from now on. Because the people making the show are idiots who are too stupid to get what great action scenes are, and what great writing for an action series is. I don't get why this has to be temporary. Why would Eggman stop using this technology? How is she able to make all of the robots at once freeze up? They wouldn't be programmed to be interconnected like that for exactly this reason. I loved the action scene when it was actually happening, since the heroes were constantly struggling during it. And that made it exciting and engaging and tense. Even if Knuckles not getting hurt by being shot really spoiled the illusion of how fake the tension is. But it was unbearable that instead of the heroes beating the robots themselves like a satisfying action scene would end based on common sense, it ended from a Deus Ex Machina out of nowhere. The heroes won't stop fighting just because Mombot told them to. She's on Eggman's side. And besides, that's not even mentioning the fact that her being given a smart chip had no reason to make her hate violence, just because studies say it's bad. Because from her perspective, what's actually smart is for Eggman's robots to win against the heroes so he'd have no obstacle in his conquest of the world. Which is smart because it would benefit Mombot if he succeeded at it. So she wouldn't act like a complete idiot after she was given the smart processor, by acting in a way that's completely detrimental to her and Eggman. Sure, being opposed to violence is smart, literally speaking, but not in the context she's in. It's such a shame that the fight had to end that way. I was really invested when I saw Sonic narrowly dodge some fire looking scared right after he taunted Eggman that a smarter processor doesn't matter when the robot is too slow. That's how things should always be handled. Right after the heroes are cocky, they get one-upped to give the villains some dignity and take the heroes down a peg after winning every time. This episode actually had a subplot as well. The heroes agree to go to a nature walk with Amy, somehow being miserable about it when that goes against the theme of the series since the beginning, and somehow agreeing to go on it even though they don't want to. This makes it forced that they even went to the forest in the first place. And because they keep touching parts of the forest, they end up activating missiles aimed at a residential area. So they have to stop them by getting to the top of them and turning them with Knuckles' super strength to change their trajectory. Somehow they weren't killed when one of the missiles they were riding on crashed into a mountain. The worst part is that we never see rings in the show, So it's even harder to believe that the heroes don't get injured when they're supposed to, because the idea of rings might not even cross your mind. At which point, how much more unbelievable would the show be? But rings have to be what's protecting them, because Knuckles got shot at point blank and it was just fine. Anyways, it sucks that we don't get an entire scene focusing on the heroes running away from that animal chasing them. That would have been tension for an action series, but instead, our time was wasted by padding that had nothing to do with action. I was impressed by how dangerous it was of Boom Eggman to make those missiles in the first place, let alone make it a secret plan that the heroes were lucky they even found out about. You'd think he would have tried it again immediately afterwards. It was an evil plan that took him completely seriously for a change, complete with it running the heroes ragged as they had to deal with 3 of them in one day. It sucks that Sonic was exasperated though. The reason Sonic being like this is horrible writing, completely out of character, is that Sonic's meant to excite the audience and get them hyped and invested in the action by being excited about dangerous situations, or at least taking them completely seriously. But Boom Sonic's always exasperated by them at worst, which does the opposite of draw you in. It tells the audience that they should be annoyed and frustrated instead because he is, when next Sonic actually is looking forward to the thing that we're supposed to be looking forward to. That's why Boom Sonic sucks. He's a grumpy old man sleeping every chance he gets instead of the thrill-seeking adventurer he's supposed to be. Thank God he's snarky most of the time. That's the only reason he feels like Sonic to me. Anyways, I liked this episode, but its ending was incredibly frustrating. But I can't compliment the idea of Steve enough. For once, it's the right kind of silly for Sonic. It's taking advantage of the fact that it's a sci-fi fantasy series, rather than being mundane and stupid. This is why I like Sonic.